Welcome back to another episode of Meredith with a Y. I am your host, Meredith Willits, and we have Jim Willits again in studio to talk about all thing marriage and blended families and a whole bunch more. So stay with us. Hello, everyone. This is Meredith with a Y, and I am your host, Meredith Willits. Today we are going to go deep, changing lives, and I am giving you the keys to the castle. We're back.
Why do you have like a t-shirt with no sleeve on and I have a sweatshirt on?
Because you're a cold person.
Now I just feel hot sitting next to you.
Well, that's what it is. So I have on the thing that we're talking about blended families today because I think that that's like a good thing to talk about. And I think a lot of people need more information on how to do blended families. But we've come up with so many fun things to talk about throughout the week. I'm like, put it in your notes, save that for an upcoming podcast.
Did it, check.
Didn't do any of it. And I told him he'd forget. I know he didn't do it.
I just tried to kiss her before it started.
He wanted it to show up.
And she kissed me and said it wasn't on screen.
Haha. Yeah. So yeah, blended families. I have to say that our blended family situation is probably one of the things that I am absolutely most proud that the four of us, so me, you, and Cody and Skylar's dad and stepmom have accomplished together, because Cody's 28, Skylar is about to be 26. They're both full functioning adults. And I think we did a really great job raising them with Allison and Rich.
I take full credit.
No.
Well, let's call it one. No.
I think you and Allison could actually take full credit because
it's tougher than me.
Yeah, there were many times when I was way too emotionally charged in certain situations and my ego was being triggered, and he and Allison had to kind of talk through a lot of situations because they were 1 degree, I guess, away from it and a little less triggered between two exes like Rich and myself. Mind you, I just want to let you know that Allison and I, so my ex-husband's wife and I, did an entire podcast series called We Married Rich, where we talk about what it was like having a blended family. And then in that series, I also interviewed Cody and Skylar, my two adult children, our two adult children, and they talked about what it was like growing up in a blended family. So I'm not speaking out of turn. This has all been talked about, or a lot of this has been talked about here on the podcast and in public. So just want to point that out before everyone's like, why are you talking about that
You're like
stuff?
a lawyer, disclaimer.
Well, I just want people to think that I'm over here like running my mouth.
No, well, didn't we run into Allison on a walk?
Yeah.
And somehow that turned into introducing.
Yeah, it was Cody and Skylar.
I don't want to take credit for introducing them.
Oh, I'm 100% taking credit.
Oh, okay. We saw Allison. We were on a walk in the Avon Lake.
Yep.
Saw Allison.
Actually,
is this right? I'm going on memory.
So my house in Ohio, can we not say cities necessarily? So my house in Ohio was 2 blocks away from my ex. So the kids could easily get back and forth from both parents. He slurps his coffee, just in case you want to know what that noise is. Besides playing with metal beds during podcasts, he also slurps his coffee. So y'all can hear what I listen to in the morning.
I'm new to this game.
During COVID, I used to ask Alexa, please play music so that I don't have to listen to my husband chew his cereal.
On fire
I am not. So yeah. So anyways, Cody and Skylar were going over to their dad's for a visitation, and we were going to walk them over to Rich's, because why not? And then head over to the lake to watch the sunset. And Allison was jogging and ran into the two of us. I've known Allison's family for 100 years, and Allison is my ex-husband's wife currently. And so we were talking. I actually have a photograph, which is amazing. I have a photograph of me pregnant with Skylar, and Allison's at Rich's house, unbeknownst to her probably, and we were watching the parade. So like we're talking, we go back far, families wise. So we were talking, and so we were walking and talking with Allison, walking Cody and Skylar over to Rich's. And Rich laid eyes on Allison, and then he contacted, I think it was my mom, and said, "Who's that girl?" Literally.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. They're married, 2 kids, yada yada. But I 100% am taking
All right.
full credit for that.
We'll jump
Because
back.
I picked my kid's stepmom, just for the
Yeah,
record.
correct. So just want to throw that story out there, but I think the other piece is too, Cody and Skylar were pretty good too. Like they had a lot to handle. But I think I was thinking about this today before we got on. Was like, I got it on occasion, but not that often. You're not my dad.
Yeah, I don't think you got that.
And there was a couple times,
Were there?
but not. I mean, usually when there was a grounded from electronics for like an hour or something.
A whole hour.
But I think that they easily could have gone that road,
Yeah, they
down
did.
that road, and they didn't. So I give them a lot of credit.
But I also think that when I look back on the success of raising 2 kids across states, 4 parents, I think that the biggest takeaway of the success was never sending the shitty text, making the shitty call, acting out of emotion. Like, we were mad, like, we got angry, we got frustrated, we had our own opinions, but we always boiled it down to what was best for the kids, what was best for the long-term relationship. Do we need to get our way right now? And I think that was when you and Allison got involved, was removing the 2 egos and the 2 hurt and the 2 I want my way, i.e. Rich and I. Now I'm not speaking for Rich, but okay, I'll speak for myself. And then you and Alice, that stop touching the microphone. You and Alice would
Help me.
would handle it. Like, and you guys kind of like I don't know what the word is, but like clearer heads prevailed when you guys got involved.
Yeah.
That's it. Just, yeah.
I'll
He's
blink,
just here to drink coffee.
I'll blink twice if I need help.
Oh, please. So
No,
yeah.
I think so. I think, yeah. I mean, for sure. I mean, not that you and Rich were, at odds or like wanting to stroke out on each other. That was the point. But I think it was just that there were lines of communication too. Like they were great about, kids are kids, and they'd go back home or and say, "Oh, mom, Jim and mom said this or do this or do that," and then they would call us and say, "Is this what happened?" And then it worked the other way too.
Yeah,
they would
that
come
is
home,
true.
They would come home and to us, and then they would say, "Oh, they would do this and that." And I was like, doesn't really sound like your dad, like, or Allison. And we would.
And Rich was always very good about like, that's your mom, that's Jim. They're not being mean. Like Rich has always been really awesome about no, like your mom's not a bad person, Jim's not a bad person. Like, I'm not listening to this. I think that he was always, and I'm sure Allison too. I've heard it come out of Rich's mouth, and like that was huge to get that support from my ex.
Yeah, and not every obviously divorce ends that way where it's going to be that nice, I guess. But I think that we communicated a lot, even though there was probably some eyebrows raised on both sides. Like, really? Wow. And then we would call them and say, "This is what," and they're like, "No, that's not the case." Or they would call us and be like, "No, that's not the case." And trust me, I understand it's not rainbows and unicorns, as some people say out there.
Such a cliche.
And for everybody, but you just got to keep the lines of communication open and try and bridge the 2 sides for sure if you can.
Yeah, and one of the things that I learned from friends recently, like in the last few years, is the concept of triangular relationships. And what my friend, was a divorcee, dad of 3 kids, is when the kids would say, "Well, mom said this," or "I hate mom because of that," or "I hate dad," is he would get mom, dad, kid on the phone, and the 3 of them would talk it over. And I wish that I would have done that sooner, because the one time that we did do that, and it was kind of recently, it changed everything. We got everybody on the phone, lines of communication were open. No one could like triangulate and talk shit about the other person. And by having all of us on the phone, it was just hammered out, ended, everyone was there instead of he said, she said. And I wish that I would have learned what a triangular relationship is. And I tell everyone now that's going through a divorce or separation or whatever, or even if you've been separated or divorced for a long time, if you're shared parenting, if you have a child and there's the he said, dad did, mom said, get everyone on the phone if it's possible. And if it's a situation where it's safe to get, because there's a lot of situations where the parents are only communicating through like court appointed apps or email chains and whatnot. And I get that. But if you have any sort of open line of communication, a kid can triangulate two parents very easily, even in the same households. I mean, mom said I could go, dad said I'm not allowed, mom said I could spend X amount of dollars, whatever. So when there's a situation where it could be a he said, she said, I look at now the idea of getting everybody on the phone, again, if it's safe and healthy, because it gets rid of that crap where kids try to manipulate and they're not doing it to be bad kids. They're doing it because, I don't know, it feels safe or they want to be liked or whatever the situation is. But do you remember that call when we did do that 3-way with Rich and how positive that was?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it just squashes it makes the person, whoever it is, whether it's a kid or someone in a coach at a team or whatever, it squashes them knowing that they think they can manipulate the system.
Yeah,
and
totally.
They stop right there, and then all the parents or whomever is involved, says, okay, everyone gets it, everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
Instead of playing whisper behind a tree and telling little lies.
The other thing too, is I'm sitting here thinking about it, it kind of like puts a period at the end of the situation. Like instead of sitting there running the story of the what if, or I wonder what, or I bet you he said, or I bet you she thought, it like puts it all on the table and squashes it, puts an end to it, puts a period at the end of the situation. And then you can move on without the animosity and the what if story growing in your head. Like it's handled with the kid, it's handled with the parent, and then you can move on once it's dealt with. The other thing that I think was huge looking back on the blended family situation working was a very clear cut child situation. So like when the kids were going, how long they were staying, what each parent was paying for, like not having to fight it out over the decade plus of raising kids with another parent that you're not married to, is having everything like the visitation, who pays for all of that. Right. And in my divorce anyways, it was very much like, hey, you pay child support, I pay for everything out of that child support. I wasn't calling him every 5 minutes asking for a co-payment or, money for photographs at the school or, money to go towards soccer, payments. I wasn't constantly having to knock on their door and call and text asking for $10, $20, etc. And so that ability to kind of separate and have that like financial piece of like, this is what I pay, this is what they pay, and then it's cut and dry. So you're not constantly aggravating and involving yourself in the other person's life.
Yeah. What we're fortunate we're able to live that way too. I mean,
well, when I was single, I did it too.
Right.
Like that constant calling.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the things I see in people that I coach right now is trying to look for the co-payment, trying to get money for clothes for school.
Yeah.
It can be really aggravating on both ends because you constantly have to reach out. But
it also takes a lot of energy.
It's so much energy. Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. I think people get caught up, and this isn't anything in life with whomever, when that's just marriages and divorces and husbands and wives and ex-wives, ex-husbands, whatever it might be. It's like, so many of us get caught up like, I'm going to be right. And I'm going to go get the $20 for their portion of soccer club. And it's like, then it turns into, well, I'm not paying it. Then it turns into a lot of discussion, a lot of talking, a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
And was it worth it? If it's $2,000 or $500 or whatever, and you need to split it 2 ways or whatever the situation might be, I get it. But if it's small, you need to ask, is it worth your energy to sit around and
But some people have to. Like, that's the thing. Like, some people need that.
No, I get it.
And I totally understand that. And the thing of it is if you're getting a call every week asking for 20, 40, you're constantly like picking that scab.
Yeah.
And I think that having very clear-cut financial, clear-cut visitation, things like that, it's going to prevent arguments coming down the pike. It's just going to calm everybody's household's going to be much more calm, instead of the ex constantly calling, or this person constantly calling, asking for this, that, and the other, changing the visitation, and so on and so forth. And that was one thing I got really lucky with Rich, or we got lucky with Rich, is he was always there for visitation. He never missed, like, ever. And I think that like anything that you can do to alleviate animosity or frustration and like holding up your end of the bargain, I think is monumental when it comes to raising kids, whether it's in your home or, in blended family situation where you have visitation, is cut out the what ifs, the wonder, the are you showing up, the are you going to send the money, all of that stuff. If you can alleviate all of that in the child support agreement, that is a game changer.
Most definitely. And I think that's your life too. It happens in the business world, in the personal friend world. If someone's gossiping about one another or there's disagreement,
call them in.
Call them all together if you can. It's not going to cause World War III. And
well, it might. But at least you get it figured out. Like, it's better than living in the what if.
Yeah. And then have them all sit down, have a conversation, and say, "Did you say this? Did you say that?" And then pick a direction and let everybody know. Because guess what? They won't do it again. They won't gossip about it.
Yeah, right.
But I think it works in blended families and
every situation. Yep. Triangular relationships are like the kiss of death. Like, in any situation where everyone's got a story and no one's sitting down and talking about it, communication, I think, is key. But let me ask you this, as a step parent, like, what advice do you have for stepdads, maybe specifically coming into, a already ready-made single mom, she's got kids, there's an ex-husband, maybe a new wife over there. What would be your comment on, or suggestion for new stepdads or step parents? Which I haven't asked them this, so this is on the spot.
Yeah, no, I think that sort of what we already talked about is it's a little cliche, but communicate like crazy. Because the biggest thing that happens in all these relationships in life is we talk about it, and then we don't bring everybody together, and then they talk about it, and then we talk about it some more, and then we talk about it with our friends, and we talk about it some more.
No one's getting anywhere.
This swirl, and everyone's talking about it, and it's growing into something that's not really happening. Where if you put everybody together and go, "No, we didn't say that. We said this," and they go, "Oh." And they go, "We didn't say that. We said this." And they go, "Oh, understood. Third party, understood.
Move
on." And I think that's, from a step parent standpoint, I think that's really, you can't feed the beast. It'd be easy for, I mean, there are many times little tiny situations would happen with, a text or a call or an email, and you would come to me and say, "This is what happened." And it would just, and I'd get, "Oh, that's a bunch of crap." Okay. And it bubbled up, but then we all talked about it and it went right back down. So I think the biggest thing is what we already talked about, which is, being able to have those conversations with the other parties, no matter what it is, and squash it, because it just grows and grows and grows. And then there's a lot of speculation. Well, they probably said this, and they probably did that, and they probably said that. And then it bubbles over, and then it's, it clashes. So, and I think that's from the other side, from the dad side of things. I think that, one thing I kind of tried to pride myself on was, and we talked about it a little bit, I never really felt like I was a stepdad. I actually hate the word stepdad, but, I wasn't asking for them to call me dad, and that wasn't, nor did they do that. And I mean, I don't think they still call me Jim.
Skylar will be like Jim, or I think in the phone it's Dad.
I wasn't
like a term of
I wasn't looking for that, but I think to answer your question, is keep the lines of communication out across with everybody, but also,
when did you know when to like back off? Like, what was that moment where you were like, all right, I got to let Meredith handle this, or, like I need to keep my mouth shut, or this isn't my lane. Like, when did that like feel like something that you had to pay attention to?
I don't know that I can put one thing on it. I think it's a balance, and you gotta feel yourself in a situation. It's a silly situation. Maybe Cody's not cleaning his room or something. I don't know what it is, or doing something or not doing something. And sorry, Code, didn't mean to pick on you, but and I think you start feeling it come up. You got to get out of it and know that you got to take a step back and not have it escalate. And I think that's the hard
So
part.
keeping your cool.
Yeah, but that's easier said than done. It's just not, and everyone gets to a point and then blows their stack, and then that's when all heck breaks loose, and that's when you get "you're not my dad," and all that stuff. I mean, no one's sitting around watching TV and they change the channel from the Bears game to the Browns game and go, "You're not my dad." Like it's always an escalation. So if you can prevent the escalation, easier said than done. But I think that's my biggest thing, and it's just know, especially early on, and gain that trust, from them, and have them realize you're not
out to get them. You're not out to whatever.
Right. Or steal their world. You gotta, and I think you also got to remember, they have a lot going on all the time. We talk about it, especially in the phones, even
that we don't know
back
about.
in the day.
Yeah.
There might be something going on at school, or girl or boy or friends or whatever it might be, and where they're sitting there stewing about something that's happening in their world that's completely unrelated to you. And you're like, go do this, or we got to go here. And they're like, and you're like, what just happened? And you think they're the jerk when it's just their life, what's going on around them. So don't forget about that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
what do you think is like I think also too, like you kind of have to have a real clear plan of like what your expectation is, or like understanding the expectation of like the financial responsibility of a step parent, like how you're going to parent, like having those conversations with your partner that you're entering a relationship with as a step parent. Like, what if she's coming into this relationship like, okay, I'm quitting my job and you're paying for everything, including my 2 kids and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, wait, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. Like, I think having a very clear-cut understanding of the financial responsibility of what you're taking on, whether you're willing to or not willing to do that, or whatever it looks like, I think that needs to be really clear, because that could come up as pretty problematic if you don't think that you're supposed to be paying for school shoes, or sports or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's this huge like, wait, I wasn't expecting to pay for travel hockey or whatever, and then you have to, and then now we have a situation where it's not my kids, not just you're not my dad, but those aren't my kids, I'm not paying for them. Because one of the things when I interviewed, I think it was Skylar for the podcast, she said one of her biggest stressors was if we ever said, well, your dad's supposed to pay for that, or, ask your dad, which we didn't do often. I really honestly can't remember, but I'm sure it was said at least a couple times, like, hey, your dad's supposed to pay for this plane ticket, or your dad's supposed to pay for whatever. I don't even know. And that caused her a lot of stress, and putting any sort of onus on your kids to go to their other parent and ask for it. And I remember as a kid, when I wanted a prom dress, my mom was like, go ask your dad. And it was like, oh, I don't really want to be in this situation. So like, I also think it's really important to understand kind of where you're headed as far as who buys what, what expenses are whose. And also as a step parent, especially if you're the primary, earner in the new household, what your expectations are as far as being a new parent.
Well, I think we definitely said those words.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like call your dad and make him pay for it.
Right.
There's a big difference. There might have been, hey, we're not just going to pay for whatever it is, pay for it, and we got to figure that out. they probably walked away with, oh my gosh, like I'm not going to call my dad or whatever the situation.
Well, I mean, it was just recently. I think I was in Ohio, and I'm like, oh, ask your dad what time they're having dinner or whatever, and like ask them what time they want me to come over. And even as adults, they were like, can you just call them?
Yeah.
They don't want to be in the in between
Right.
situation. So even as adults, it was like causing anxiety to be a go between. And I was like, oh crap, I did it again because I didn't, want
Which
to
is
do
kind of
that.
cool, to be honest. We just talked about the triangular relationship. They're literally trying to they're like
De-triangulate.
They're like, no,
And I'm like, no, let's do what he said.
You
She
talked
said.
to him before, you handle it.
Yeah.
But I think that I don't know. I don't know. We sat around. Maybe we did. Did we talk about? I don't know that we talked about finances like that. But before we got married or not. But
I think we did in a sense of like, hey, I don't have a job because I just moved to New Jersey, and you're the only one making money, and this is what I have coming into the marriage. So there's no magical money falling from the sky outside of,
I don't. Yeah, I don't think. I think it was transparent. I don't think it was an in-depth conversation. Like, oh my god, But I also think that goes along with everything in every relationship, especially as you're getting further along in the relationship. What's their religion? What's their are they going to have? Do they want to have kids or not? Or how many kids? Like, I might have wanted 7 kids, and you're like, okay, like, you know what I mean? Like, and sometimes that kind of sucks the life out of the room in the relationship standpoint. But they're difficult conversations you can have subtly and with your partner, and be like, hey, just so you know, so when you do get further down that road and you are going to get married or whatever the situation might be, and they're like, hey, I don't want any kids, and you're like, well, I do, now what? And I think so. I think
I'm watching that on the Housewives of Dubai right now. The one guy, Sergio, wants a kid, and Caroline is like 47 years old. And I don't know how they didn't have that conversation before they got married and built a house. But at 47, I wouldn't want to be having a baby necessarily. But I think these conversations like that, to me, when people are like, oh, I don't want to do a long distance relationship. And you and I were long distance for 2 years, a year before we got engaged. I think that was amazing because we had all we could do was have conversations on the phone. We couldn't be distracted by going out and drinking or having fun or whatever the thing was. We had to have conversations because that was the only way we could connect. And in those conversations, I think we learned a lot about each other. And I think a lot of people don't have the difficult conversations because they're afraid that whatever they say might end the relationship. But I'd rather end the relationship while I'm dating somebody and realize they want 12 kids or they want 0 kids or they want to live in a farm and they want to live in the city than 10 years down the line, 3 kids, and you're not in alignment with each other as far as life goals.
Yeah. I mean, I think they say red flags now, if they're there now, they're definitely going to be there later.
Yeah.
I think that
I used to like all the noises you made, and and now you're so noisy, I could like literally die.
Yeah. We talked about that. My dad was like that. I don't know.
Noisy?
Yeah, and it used to drive me crazy.
Well, you're just as noisy now.
I know. Well,
he got into bed last night and made more noises than a freaking water buffalo. I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you making so much noise?
Compared me to a water buffalo.
But it is amazing. It is kind of like, why do you have to like?
Is that the noises I make?
I think there might be worse. I'm going to record them and play it for next week. I don't think you were like taking off like your sweatshirt is like a full blown process. It's like an orchestra of sound just to take a sweatshirt off.
17 years, folks. That's what
is it 17? We haven't figured that
out. Marriage
is it
17.
17 years. But
together 19. That's wild, actually.
Yeah. Oh, here's Hadley. She was coming to be a part of the conversation because God forbid.
I don't know what we're talking about. We're
talking about how much noise you make. COVID was interesting. Lots of cereal chewing during COVID. We used to go in the family room and eat cereal.
You blink too loud.
You blink too damn loud.
I'm like, she's like, stop blinking. I'm like, okay, I'll stop blinking.
Yeah, right. But we did get a lot of positive feedback about last week. We haven't even posted it. I haven't posted it to Podcast Land. It's just been like Facebook and YouTube and stuff like that. But
we did.
I told you that I was going to talk about the fact that I was trying to hurt you yesterday at the softball game. And because you blocked me, you ended up hurting my finger.
Okay. Self-defense is not blocking.
You blocked me.
She was punching me.
And I was not punching.
And I was like this.
I was going to stick my finger in your rib cage because
Mr. Miyagi karate chopped.
You karate chopped, and then when you karate chopped, it stuck. It made my finger went into one of the screws on the chair, and I got hurt. And
let me see.
You shouldn't block.
There's not even a mark.
There's right there. See, the skin's missing.
Oh, there's a piece of skin. There's literally a piece of skin hanging out.
See, I told you, but there's damage.
I mean, wow, man. You should probably
let me do what I want to do.
Cut that finger off.
You should let me do what I want to do.
I was trying to defend myself, for the record.
Don't do that.
Self-defense in the court of law, I would have been right 100%.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because I could have been just like, I was going to reach my arm around and give him like a hug.
I'm like, why is it? I thought she had rings on. She's like pushing into my ribs, and she goes, because I got my knuckle like right here, and she sticks it in my ribs.
But you love it.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
I can't react because it's on film.
It's on film. Now people would see you.
Right. And they would probably post like, he's right.
I'm pretty sure that when we drive down the street.
Why don't we turn the comments on so people can talk about it?
Because someone has said something shitty about my nose ring. That's why.
All right, we'll take it off.
See, your nose looks stupid, truly. What comes over you women?
C.A. Robbins.
Yeah.
You see yourself out of that podcast, lady.
Yeah.
Sorry. That was not nice.
Yeah, we do get live comments on Facebook. So this person decided to troll.
And that's okay.
But I don't care.
I mean, how does she even see that? How big of a screen does she have?
She's probably watching us on her 75-inch television because she can't get enough and she just wants to see me really close up.
Oh, let's not kill her. We're just BSing
her. I know.
What was? Oh yes, Yes, I defended myself. I took some skin off your knuckle. I told her I was sorry.
Right, live and in person, right here.
And then she talked about it for the next 14 hours.
That's what happens, folks.
And I can't now.
What do you think we should talk about next week?
Ring light.
Yeah, your sister's going to give you crap again.
I know. Next week, I don't know. Maybe we'll get.
Maybe this week you'll take some notes whilst paying attention to things.
We were out and she said, that'd be good notes. And I said, I got it. Locked them in right here.
Nope, doesn't work. You got to write it down.
I forgot.
I told you got to write it down because the next thing comes up and you just move on to the next thing.
I know.
But you got a lot of feedback. Oh, I said that in every single podcast, we should mention one of our friends and then they have to find where in the podcast.
Do it at the end.
So this week, I think we're going to mention Brian. And because I guess, do they want to be on the podcast? Because they have a really interesting story because they have blended families and have moved into a new country.
International
couple of blended families. So that's some next level stuff.
We'll have to screen them.
We'll have to see if they're good.
Yeah.
I don't know if they can make the cut, but maybe if Brian
raise our viewers and.
In other countries. Yeah, in other countries.
I'm not allowed to say anything.
Yeah, you're not allowed to say. Jim's let me give you my address. And my personal
phone number. Here's Brian's address.
Yeah, here's Brian's address. Go visit him if you want to ask him questions. Yeah. So Brian's the person of the week.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us again this week. We will be back next week to talk about maybe what you keep in your notes section. Because as soon as we got up,
how to keep notes.
how to keep notes so you have things to talk about on your podcast.
Why is it my responsibility all of a sudden? Where's your
I'm carrying the conversation.
Wow, there it is, folks.
I mean, no offense, but I wouldn't say that you were carrying this conversation.
All right, wrap it up.
All right. I'll see you guys here next week. If you have anything you want us to talk about or when it comes to marriage and whatnot, please feel free to email me at meredithbullets@gmail.com or message me on any of the socials. But I will see you guys here all next week. Have a good one. Thanks for listening. If you would like to connect on a more personal level, head over to meredithbullets.com or on Instagram at Meredith with a Y for behind-the-scene footage and outtakes. Please subscribe and come back each week for more Meredith with a Y. Thanks again.